What's going on, everybody? It's Novell J. Lee with a new BUZZCast here at Buzzworthy Radio. And I had the pleasure of speaking with Richard Hall, and he directed the film Fighting Spirit, A Combat Chaplain's Journey. This is his directorial debut. However, I was very impressed with this documentary because, as you'll hear when you get into this interview between the two of us, I had no idea exactly what a chaplain was and exactly what they do for our heroes that are fighting on enemy lines, and it's just a whole new world that I got to experience when I watched this documentary, and they truly are the unsung heroes. And this film will premiere in theaters in time for Veterans Day next month. So please take a listen to this interview. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I hope you guys will too. So here it is, our interview with Rich Hull. Take a listen. So I'm sitting here with my next guest, everybody. This is Rich Hall. We are talking about Fighting Spirit, a combat chaplain's journey. And first of all, before I even get into the film, how are you doing, sir?
I'm well, thank you, and thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So now getting into the film, after we explain pleasantries, I did watch it, and it's first of all, for everybody that doesn't know, even though I've said this maybe like 10,000 times on my show, I love documentaries. So it if you give me a documentary to watch, I will completely watch it. No holds bar. I'll literally just sit back and watch it. So I thoroughly enjoy this one, but it's also one where you don't really see a lot of discussion about, which I thought was really good. Because for me, I also like it when I watch something that I don't know necessarily anything about. And uh Chaplains I don't know anything about. So I got to see a little bit about this in this film and got a little bit more knowledge about it. So first of all, thank you for bringing that to me as well as to everybody else who will get the opportunity to watch it. Just to know that there's someone there that's there for our soldiers fighting overseas or wherever they are, that are really the unsung heroes. And how did you get involved in this project? Because I heard this was years in the making in order for this to actually make it to the screen.
Well, I think years in the making describes every documentary
Pretty
ever.
much.
And it's interesting because and I'll surely tell you how I got involved in it, but the experience that you had watching it is something that I've noticed a lot of people are having as we go through kind of these word of mouth screenings that lead to the theatrical release on November 8th for Veterans Day. I've noticed that there's kind of three different types of audiences. The first is the military ones. And for those guys, they have this very powerful reaction that starts with maybe recollections of their own service, but then morphs into an appreciation for somebody giving voice to their story in maybe a way that they couldn't necessarily do it. And that usually becomes very emotional for them. I was just at a screening at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee over the weekend, and these
Mhm.
big giant ex-Marines like that you would not want to meet in a bar fight were coming up with tears running down their face and giving me hugs. And then other people were hugging them, and it became very communal. So like that's one. I think there's a faith-based element to it that faith-based audiences have almost kind of started thinking of it as a litmus test. If kind of you see this movie, it really, you've been a good faith-based person, and I think that it's what's interesting about what combat chaplains do is they come from a particular faith, but when you're out there on the front lines, you're dealing with people of all faiths and no faiths, and so I
Mhm.
think that the faith-based audience really sees something special for themselves, and they've really gotten behind the movie. But the one that you just described is like the general population, like
Yeah.
people that don't necessarily have a connection to the military that's super deep or a connection, maybe even to faith-based or not faith-based. It could go either way. But I think it's that so many people just didn't know that this as a profession existed. And
Yeah.
therefore, if they show up and they see it, they really are like interested in learning about it. And you're right. These are the people that support the people who are out there serving us as Americans. And so for us to learn something about that, I think is really powerful. And of course, I'm biased in this, but I think they also react to the storytelling as well. And they really find that interesting too. So anyway, back to your original question. I got involved in this, as you said, years ago. And it was because I sit on the board of a production company in Los Angeles called Paulist Productions. It's a
Mhm.
nonprofit. It was started 60 years ago by a Catholic priest, and they have won numerous awards and Emmys and, super well respected group. And they came to me and said, we want to make this documentary about military chaplains, and would you help us? And I did. They asked me because I had years ago, probably a dozen years ago, Halle Berry and I made a documentary about black soldiers that had fought in all the U.S. wars we ever had, and
Yes, you
she and I
did.
won. Yeah, and so she and I won the NAACP Image Award for that, and a bunch of other awards. And in some respects, it was a project that really built a lot of trust with the military. And so when
Mm.
these guys came, a dozen years later to me and said, "Hey, we really need somebody that the military trusts to help us kind of build that connection and get the support of the military so that we can interview active duty, you know, uh, military folks in uniform and on military bases and tap into their very extensive archives." And so what I signed up for was one phone call, and you can imagine that this one phone call became more and more and more, and
Of course.
ultimately the guy that had the original idea for the film ultimately ended up not being able to be the filmmaker on it. And so I stepped in. And while I think this is like my 28th movie as a producer, it also is my first movie as a director. And so that to me has been a really fun experience as well, and kind of seeing the world through a different lens. But like you, I think what really attracted me to the story as a filmmaker was the fact that you've got this profession of people that you know, go to combat wearing a uniform but carry no weapon.
They carry no weapons. Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's got to be motivated by something far larger than just a profession, right? And so that calling, if you will, juxtaposed at kind of the intersection of the chaos of war. Like, I thought that was interesting. Like, we'd never seen the collision of those two worlds like explored cinematically before, and I thought that that would be really fun to dig into. So I mean, ultimately, that's how I got involved. And as you said, it was a few years ago. These things take on a life of their own, and so now we finally get to see it come out into the world. For Veterans Day in theaters.
You just mentioned that this is your directorial debut in this film, and I also understand that this is the first of its kind where it's a co-production between Hollywood and the U.S. Army Chaplain Corps. So it's just there's a lot of first going on here, and I love that aspect of this because, as you just so eloquently put it, there's so much that we are learning about chaplains and the fact that there is this profession out there that is really not talked about. It's not spoken up about so much, so you really have no idea what's going on the other side. And I'm watching. Obviously, with documentaries, everybody, there is the interview that goes on in between where you're seeing the scenes and everything. So I'm watching the speakers talk about their experiences and everything, and I've never felt so, and I think you just said it a few minutes ago, this one word, connected to a lot of what they were saying and feeling talking about this. And I think like the faith-based and the non-faith-based was talked about as well as race was also talked about in the film when it comes to chaplains as well. And it's just and then I'm just watching everything else where they're talking about we're here on I'll say it enemy lines sometimes and then we're under the impression that we're not going to make it out alive. And I can't remember the one gentleman's name and it just stuck and he just basically said that he no longer had fear. He knew he either was going to make it back home to his wife, who he's just been married to for 2 years, or he's going to go home to his dad in heaven. And that literally just stuck with me. I think that was probably the point in the film where I was like, no uncertain terms. I just said, holy shit. You know what I mean? And it just basically made me go and just went, this guy knew he wasn't afraid anymore. He knew he was either going to make it out of this alive or he wasn't, and he was okay with he. I don't want to say he was okay with that, but he accepted that could happen either way. And just listening to these stories, it was just very empowering as well as um, just sitting here going through that journey with them in that an hour and 10 minutes. Just it was powerful.
Yeah, I agree with you. The guy you're referring to is named Jeff Strucker, and Jeff was portrayed by an actor in the movie Black Hawk Down,
Black Hawk Down,
and
yes.
and he had this very powerful experience that you just described, where he realized I'm going to die, but I'm okay with it, and it ultimately led him to becoming a military chaplain. So he left the military, went back to school, got became and then came back into the military as a combat chaplain. And so it's a very powerful story that he has. And he's also a very eloquent guy. And so he also has another line that I love in the movie where he talks about going to combat. And when you leave combat, you can never be the same person. And you wind up with these scars on your soul, which is a really powerful term for me. I thought that was really interesting. And it's
Hmm.
something that, I'm not a veteran. And so my dad was a veteran, and I co-directed the movie with another veteran named Justin Roberts, who was a former Army chaplain. And I did that, like, that's an intentional choice because I want to make sure that the stories that we're telling about veterans are very often, they have a lot of authenticity, right?
Of course.
And Justin, as a veteran, I think could really lend that. And so when I heard Jeff talking about scars on your soul and going home to your father in heaven, like it, I viewed it through the lens of a non-veteran, but then Justin viewed it through the lens of a veteran. And all of those
Hmm.
great phrases made it into the movie because they mean something different to different people.
Right.
And so I think what we've tried to do is to try to bring some of these stories that are not really well known. I don't think anybody's really told most of these stories because the chaplains don't want to be seen as the heroes. They don't want to be the story, and they don't therefore go out and tell their stories. So it falls on someone like me and my partner Justin and my partner Chris Pratt, um, to really like come in and almost force those stories into kind of the public sphere. Because if
Yeah.
it were left up to the chaplains, they're so humble and caring that they're just like, no, 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 I don't want to be the story. But they're powerful stories and they're true heroes. And so we need to we need those stories. I'm a big, I've been in the media business for a long time, and I'm a big believer in sort of the power of story and narrative. And I think particularly at a time in this country where we're going through a fairly divisive presidential election, our movie comes out 3 days after the
3
presidential
days
election.
after the election, yeah.
Like we as a country, we're looking for things to unite us because there's so many things that divide us. And we purpose built this movie to be something that everybody can agree on, no matter what part of the political spectrum, the economic spectrum, the geographic spectrum. Like, we can all agree that the work of combat chaplains is incredibly impactful for the heroes that fight for us.
Yeah.
And so we kind of picked that date, yes, because it's Veterans Day, but also because we felt like the country would need this movie at the time. And so, I think it's very timely. I think it's very timely. So yes, it's been years in the making, but the date of distribution I think was a very conscious choice for us.
I love how you said that because I kind of picked up on that too when watching it and then just learning about it as well, is that chaplains don't tell their stories because they don't want to be seen as the heroes. I love that you said it that way because they really don't. And they basically put it to our veterans that we know and love, that we support, as the heroes. They don't want to be in the spotlight and the limelight, but I love the fact that you also added the caveat to that, is that they are also heroes too because of what they're doing for our veterans out there. And I love that you're bringing this to light and you're getting everybody involved, not just from yourself and Justin, but then also Chris Pratt, who you just mentioned. And I thought that was interesting when I saw, yes, guys, it's that Chris Pratt. Just FYI, it is that Chris Pratt. It's not someone of the same name. It's the Chris Pratt you are thinking of. So that is involved in this film. And I just have to ask, how did he become involved in the project as well?
Well, I've been around the movie space for, more years than I really want to admit. And most
Well,
of the
there's
movie.
one movie I want to touch on about that because I know you've been around for a while and it's one of my favorite movies, but I'll get into that after this one
Oh my
goes.
gosh, now you've baited me. I can't wait to come back to it and find out which one it is. But I've only made three documentaries. This is the third one, and I've found that it's been a very successful strategy
Mhm.
to partner with somebody that has a very big voice and use that to kind of rise above the clutter. Because unlike a superhero movie or an animated movie, like we don't have those giant marketing budgets, and so we're reliant
Right.
on people's word of mouth and the movie to stand on its own and people to get behind the movie and tell their friends and share our social media posts and share our website at fightingspiritfilm.com and I did that with Halle Berry with our last project with the Army. Matthew McConaughey and I made a documentary about the guy who was the football coach at the University of
Yes, you
Texas when we
did.
were kids
Yes, you
growing
did.
up in Texas, and I've just found that to be a really successful strategy. But the tricky part is aligning the celebrity partner with the subject matter and really finding somebody that resonates, that really has a passion for the subject matter. Because you don't want just a random celebrity for the sake
Correct.
of having a celebrity. You want somebody that's truly as passionate as you are. And that's what we found with Chris. So Chris has a incredible manager, incredible agent, incredible publicist. We were able to sort of like galvanize all of them to recommend him watching the movie. He watched it, he fell in love with it. That kind of steamrolled and that led to where we are today. And he's an incredibly passionate guy. He's very supportive of the military. He's got a very heavy faith-based element to his life. There's a lot of boxes that this checked for him.
Mhm.
And so once he said, yes, I'm in, then he's just been an incredible partner. He posted something today on his Instagram account with, 50 million followers. And, his words were so powerful and kind, and we're so grateful for him about how much he loves the movie and he wants people to go see it. And, that you can't fake that. And
Yeah.
so it's really authentic with him. And we're super grateful to have him as our partner.
When you said that when you want to get somebody attached to it and not just any type of celebrity, but someone who definitely resonates with the subject matter at hand, I completely agree with you because when I saw that Chris Pratt was involved in this, I immediately said in my head, this is a subject matter that he would totally be on board with and respect, and he would, as you just said, it's not something that you can fake. So immediately, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I completely agree. That's exactly why I felt that he was also involved in it. So your answer did not disappoint what I had immediately thought in my head. So it definitely was the answer that I had said for myself. So I completely 100% agree with that. And pivoting backward to my previous comment about that, it actually isn't a documentary, but it is something that I might be off by my math a little bit, but I think it's 26 years old now. And it pretty much got me into the whole, well, I was already in that trope anyway, watching these types of films regardless, but more so as I got older, she's all that. It definitely was one of my favorites back in the day, and um, loved Rachel Lee Cook and Freddie Prinze Jr. in that film. I really did, and just the fact that I then got to become a fan of Not Another Teen Movie where it was parodied, and getting to see that, it's just I just loved that film, and I just loved all those types of films. So, you've been, I mean, unfortunately, you've been in part of my life for quite some time because of the films that have been out there, and not just with the documentaries, but also with that as well. So, yeah, definitely. Wanted to shout that out real quick.
That's so kind of you to say. I'm glad you enjoyed the movie. That movie was really impactful for all the people that were, part of making it. It really elevated, I think, all of our careers, whether it's Freddie Prinze or Rachel Lee Cook or Matthew Lillard, and all the people involved. It really took us up a couple notches, and that was a really fun experience for all of us to go through together. And every time I would run into one of those people, there's a bit of a shared experience thing that really connected us. And for me, when I came to Hollywood, I wanted to make teenage movies because those are the movies that I grew up loving. And I grew up on the John Hughes movies, like
John
16
Hughes,
Candles
16
and
Candles,
Some Kind of Wonderful and Pretty in Pink
Ferris
and
Bueller,
Ferris Bueller. And like that genre had really
Weird
been
Science was another one, and it was just
another great one for sure. And, because Hollywood does this, they burn out genres, right? So if one
correct.
volcano movie is good, 72 or better. And so the genre had sort of been dormant for a decade or more when I came to
Yeah,
Los Angeles. And I thought, well, I love action movies and I love sports movies, but these were the movies that were like the soundtrack of my teenage years. And I wanted to reignite that because that genre had not been around.
yeah.
And I think we did that with She's All That. I think it created, I mean, I made a bunch of teen movies after that. Other people made it. And I think we really kind of like rebuilt that genre. And it's interesting for me because then the thing that got me into my first project with the military was actually the teen movies of it all because I loved telling stories about high school because
Mhm.
everybody has had kind of a different college experience. Not everybody goes to college. Some people don't. Like there's
Yeah.
but high school is universal. Like nobody feels like they belong. Everybody feels like a fish out of water. Like
Yep.
all are forced to go to school, whether you like it or not. And so there's something very universal about that. And I really gravitated to that and I loved it. However, making teenage movies pays the bills. And but I really felt like if I was going to be doing this work to create a platform in, Hollywood, that I wanted to also do something that more than paid the bills, but changed the world. And so about that time, this project that Halle Berry and I did with called For Love of Liberty, the story of America's Black Patriots. And we, that project came across my desk and I just thought, this changes the world. These are stories that haven't been told before of, African American contributions to every
Mhm.
US war we've ever had. And, you know, I, those deserve to be told too. And so I thought that we could really change the world. And so that's what got me into the documentary space, right? And so I like the ability to kind of go between a project that pays the bills, but also a project that really is a labor of love, and
Yeah.
may not pay the bills. But that combination, like I love that, that gets me up in the morning. And so I hopefully we will change the world, make it a better place with this movie as well.
I hope so too. And I really appreciate you telling me that and speaking that story to me, especially since it was something I grew up on. And you're right. Once that came out, then it seemed more started coming out after that. So I love that the trend kind of continued on after that for a little while. And I really do appreciate the time. I really do appreciate the fact that you did get to speak with me about this film. And I can't wait for everybody to check it out on November 8th. Fighting Spirit, A Combat Chaplain's Journey premieres in theaters then. And give me the website again to where they can also go, because I think you mentioned that a few moments ago.
Sure, it's fightingspiritfilm.com.
Thank you so much. Rich, it was a pleasure. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm super
Absolutely.
grateful for the conversation.
Thank you. I want to thank Rich Hall for stopping by the BuzzCast to talk about Fighting Spirit, A Combat Chaplain's Journey. You can find out more information on the film at fightingspiritfilm.com. From there, you'll be able to purchase tickets and find out where it's playing at your local theater when it premieres on November 8th. But that's going to do it for me for right now. I'm Novell J. Lee, making sure you keep getting the latest buzz with Buzzworthy Radio by logging on to our website at buzzworthyradiocast.com. You can also find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Buzzworthy Radio, and liking us on our Facebook page. I'm also on Instagram at BuzzNav, and I know I mentioned this on our last podcast, but guess what? We are now on Spotify. Yes, you can now find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course, iHeartRadio. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.